Hello, Chinwaggers. I am your... What was I going to say? I don't even know. I lost it. I was going to say, I know who you are. I know. I was going to say, I am your commanding officer. I was about to say, who the hell am I? I'm not your commanding officer. I'm your host. I'm your host, Paul Giamatti.
Hey, that actually reminds me. Do you ever get like bits of a script like stuck in your head and they just come out of your mouth like that? Like, because you've memorized so many scripts. I've been meaning to ask you this, and here's the...
Probably, yeah. I think more so in the past. I mean, when I retained more of these things, I'd less of it now. I feel like I'm hitting that point where it's like, somebody said like, you reach your tank is full and it's I'm starting to shed stuff. So it's like, I don't know that but I think there's probably, I'll tell you, here's a weird thing. I'll tell you, here's a definite weird thing. I have had basically a song stuck in my head for 20 years. I've had this thing. I've had spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle. I've got spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle.
Is that like a Gene Autry thing? What is it?
Yes, it is. And I did it in a movie. We did it in a movie. I did it in this movie about Andy Kaufman called Man on the Moon, this movie with Jim Carrey. And at some point in that movie, he sings it. That song has literally been stuck in my head for 20 years. It'll come back every now and then. It'll come back. It's been stuck in my head for years. Not on a daily basis. Yeah, not on a daily basis, but I definitely will. It'll come back all the time. So I got they call that...
It's an earworm.
An earworm or earwig? Is that what they call it? Yeah, earworm.
I've heard it's said as an earworm.
Earworm.
Like it gets in and you can't get rid of it.
Yeah, so I've had that earworm in my head for ages.
I wonder why. Are there certain melodies, I wonder, that are just so goddamn catchy that you can't, it's like a virus?
I suppose so. I mean, people will claim that those. I have a friend who used to claim he had, if you got an earworm, if you got something stuck in your head, that the song, I can't remember. Do you remember that song? My baby takes the morning train. Remember that song? He claimed that was the palate cleanser, that could get the earworm out of your head and it wouldn't get stuck in your head. And he was like, no, I know. And I was always like, that's going to get stuck. And he would say, no, that one won't stay in your head. It'll get rid of the other one, but it won't stay in your head. So
I love the idea of a palate cleanser. That's great.
Like the one that's going to like an earworm exterminator. That song. I don't know. I don't think it works. Oh, boy. No. Well, here we are. We're back again, folks. Back again.
Oh, yeah. It's a show.
Yes, that's right.
Welcome to the Chinwag, everybody.
Yeah, talking about the Chinwag earworm. We're going to plant more. We're going to plant these earworms in your head this week. Recently, we spoke with the great Leslie Kean, the groundbreaking investigative journalist. She's behind such works as Surviving Death and UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. We talked to her about spiritualism.
Yes, right? Before. And that was really fascinating. But her real sort of claim to fame, I think, is the UFOs, the UAPs, as it were.
Yeah. So we had a pretty deep dive session in general with her. And we had this second episode with her talking about this whole current state of kind of what's
she
going
knows
on
everybody in the field. Like she introduced like some of these people to this congressional hearings. She's a really big
No, she's like, yeah, it's really amazing. She's had a long association with this stuff, and she really knows it, and she knows the world of it. It's fascinating. So here's the continuation of our fascinating Chinwag with Leslie Kean. There certainly seems to be a lot of compelling evidence for the existence of UFOs now.
Exactly.
Then you have the Pentagon and folks like that. Although I can't quite figure out what the point of view of those guys is. I mean, it seems like they sort of come out and say maybe this stuff is real, and then they seem to back off of it. But certainly, I mean, since about sort of 2017, right? Your interest in this goes further back than that, though? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back to 1999. I mean, I published my first story in 2000 in the Boston Globe on that.
What was it? Was that relating to?
I was relating to a report from France that was literally what got me started in all of this. I don't know.
And that's in this book, right? A lot of that.
Yeah, that's in the introduction. I talk about it. So it's just in one line, it was a study of UFOs done by military and high level people in France that weren't going to be making things up, and they put out this report. And they said that the most likely explanation was that these were extraterrestrial. That's it in a nutshell. And I was like, what? I was like this reporter doing my job at a radio station, and then this report, somebody sent me a translation of this report. It's like 90 pages. And I read this and these people are saying this. It's like, whoa, this means something, What if an American equivalent said that?
Yeah.
I mean, these are like 3-star generals, admirals, police chief, engineers, scientists, blah, blah, blah. They spent all this time studying this and interviewing pilots and so on. So that's what got me going on it. I just said, this is a huge story. And then I had just began a long journey with it, and I could not put it down. And I learned about what the taboo and the ridicule factor and the strangeness of how nobody takes it seriously and the government makes up things. And then throughout that, I kept trying to report on it as factually as I could. And there's no one else really doing that in the mainstream.
No.
So I just kept doing articles, and then you could freelance pretty easily, which you can't really do now. So it was a different world then, and I just kept doing it and learning more. And I got to know some of the key people in the Deep Insiders eventually, wrote a book at it in 2010. That opened a lot of doors, and then did press conferences and whatever. And then this 2017 thing came along. And that changed everything.
And you're sort of hooked into it because you have this sort of reputation, and you've been investigating this stuff.
I mean, that's why the whole thing happened in 2017 was because I was called to a meeting to meet. I was the one that brought that story to the New York Times.
This is that Luis Elizondo, right? And this was a sort of acknowledgement that there was a sort of department. Department might be a fancy name for what it was.
Sort of
there was an office, a program with where they had $20 million or something, and run by this gentleman, Luis Elizondo, who was a former military guy,
a counterintelligence guy. High clearances. It wasn't really the $20 million was actually provided to the department, a program set up by the Defense Intelligence Agency a couple of years before the Pentagon program started. That was a little bit of a confusing element. But the point of the story was there was a Pentagon program that had been studying UFOs. And this man, Luis Elizondo, was just resigning because of his frustration that not enough resources were being provided to that program.
Right.
And Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, had funded it and gotten it going and everything. And it was just, and then we had 2 videos that we brought out with the story too. And it was the combination of knowing that our government had been actively involved in studying this when they've basically been telling everybody that they're not interested in it, had to mean something. And it made the topic legitimate. It made it okay for people to take it seriously openly, which they couldn't really do before. And then Congress started getting involved.
Right. And he sort of, when he left the office, he released these sort of really sort of compelling sort of firsthand encounters with pilots seeing these things. And, you can watch these videotapes of these, and
these
radars.
We got 2 of them with our story, the first story. And I think that's so much of what...
Was that the Tic Tac thing? The
one was the
white...
Tic Tac, Okay. And the other one was the gimbal, where you can hear the pilots... Whoa, that noise so fast. The pilots are saying, look at that thing. It's rotating. That's what.
Right. It's a sort of strange rotating kind of like box-like thing. That's sort of diamond-shaped
it's going up
thing.
Along a cloud bank. That is probably the most watched video the New York Times that's ever had. They still show that video every time any news story covers UFOs. You'll see that video. And it's very cool because you hear the pilots talking about it.
Yeah.
And then they say, look, there's a whole fleet of them. And
really?
The fact is that fleet was chopped off. We didn't get to see that, but there was also a video of the fleet.
Showing multiple ones of these things.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot more videos that are way better than what.
And there's some thinking, and I don't know if it was with these sightings or not, that the things are coming out of the water or going back into the water, or is that different set of sightings?
That was a different set of sightings, but that's a really interesting aspect of the whole discovery process. And it's becoming more sort of out there now. The people are way more interested in what they call USOs, underwater submerged objects.
Yeah.
And they've now expanded the language to include these transmedium objects, which are ones that can go from the water to our atmosphere into space. There's like 3 different environments. And they call those ones transmedium objects. So that's why they had to change the language.
I haven't heard about this. So there's something that can occupy 3 spaces like that?
It seems that way, Paul. I mean,
oh,
it
wow.
seems that way. I mean, I don't know if there's any data showing one object going from water to atmosphere to space. But my point is that the UFOs, the UFOs can operate in all those 3 different environments. So they had to change. It was originally called unidentified flying object. Well, then it was called unidentified aerial phenomena. So they had to change the word aerial to anomalous in order to include the underwater objects, which aren't aerial.
Yeah.
So I really love the fact that it's now anomalous, because that includes a whole much broader range of phenomena. Exactly. And that's official language now. That's part of legislation.
Yeah.
You know, that we're studying these things. I mean, this is like completely real because the government is involved with it.
One working hypothesis is that you have a kind of foreign tech that, because the propulsion of these things looks so weird, one suggestion is maybe it's like some secret Chinese program or whatever.
But it's impossible. Tech. I mean, it's like, even if we're thinking the Chinese have done it, it's doing things that nobody can do. So it seems like not a great explanation for it. But yeah.
Is that should we rule that out, like in your view? Because I know the general view is now to use this language that it has a non-human origin. But as the person who studied this a lot, is that what you think too? Is you agree with Paul that it just moves too weird, or there's additional data?
It's doing impossible things, isn't it? I mean, it's doing things that are completely defying the laws of physics.
Yeah, or at least the laws of physics. I mean, not all the physics, because the physicists will make that correction. It's not engineering that we humans are able to accomplish. Let's put it, you might be able to explain how it's conceivable that you could create these kinds of things. Right. But we're not capable of doing it.
Nobody has been capable of, They can hit speeds without building into these speeds from a dead stop. They can already, right? I mean, there's no acceleration.
Yeah, they can go from a dead stop to gone.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not to say that I'm sure there are plenty of sightings that people have that can be explained. I mean, most of the sightings can be explained.
Yeah, most can.
As advanced technology. And it's not to say that we know all the technology that exists out there, but I don't think it can explain all of them. And you also have to remember, Stephen, that the same things were seen back in the 40s and 50s that are seen now, the same kinds of behaviors of these objects. And it's like, we certainly didn't have technology then.
But the white Tic Tac thing itself seems to be a new thing. Seems to be in the sort of taxonomy of these things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me how these things change through time. And I've always find that so fascinating, the sort of like cultural determination of these things, and then through time how they change. And so now we have this thing that actually sounds more like in the world of kind of iPods and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like in the kind of design, it sounds more like an Apple product. It sounds like something that comes off the assembly line at Apple, which is interesting. Yeah, which is funny to me that the technology, what we're seeing seems to be determined somewhat culturally, which is always interesting to me.
Let me just add to that, though, Paul, that Luis Elizondo was able to find some documents from the 40s and 50s that describe the Tic Tac.
Oh,
fascinating.
But then they refer to it as a butane tank because they didn't have Tic Tacs then.
Right, of course. Yeah.
There were no Tic Tacs, so they had to find some other analogy.
Then there were cigar-shaped objects that could be now seen as that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. That's great.
And then there were saucers and then triangles, which all sort of still exist.
I was wondering, Paul and I talk a lot about Jacques Vallee. I can't entirely understand his perspective because he's sort of like, he's a little bit like Carl Jung. It's like partly he thinks they're real, but sometimes I hear him suggesting it's projections of the imagination or it's spiritual in nature. Do you agree with Vallee, or or do you think they're literally aliens, or do you think that that's some other psychological phenomenon that we don't understand properly?
Or a combination thereof.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they're literally aliens. I mean, back 20 years ago, it was sort of the thinking was the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which is what everyone called it, which they thought were visitors from somewhere, some other planets. But no, I don't think anyone really thinks that way anymore. The thing about Vallee is he was way ahead of the curve in proposing that this sort of broader, less physical dimensions of this phenomenon, that it's not simple. that you have to connect it to all the stories through history of fairy lore and all this stuff.
Yeah, right.
And he was like, he would do that brilliantly. And a lot of people didn't like it because they just wanted them to be ETs.
Yeah.
But now everyone's talking like that a lot more. I mean,
really?
Who's, you know, in that sort of world of realizing there's a physical dimension to it, obviously, but there's other dimensions too. There's other aspects of this that
even Whitley Strieber is sort of like that too, right?
Oh,
He's
yeah,
sort of
very
a little
much
bit
so.
both, right?
I mean, Whitley to this day does not feel like he really understands what happened to him. You know, he feels that he's interacting with these entities and these people he calls the visitors, but it's so hard to explain.
His books read almost more like spiritual autobiography than almost anything else. You know, I mean, his sense that he's encountered.
It is.
Yeah, and I get that entirely. I mean, to me, that entirely makes sense. Did you know Bud Hopkins?
Very well. Yeah, very, very well. Yeah, I mean, he was, you know, there's Bud Hopkins and there was John Mack from Harvard.
Yeah, who was very interesting.
Yeah, John Mack, you know, had the credentials of being a Harvard psychiatrist and head of the Harvard Medical School or something, you know, really highly
like
regarded
in the 80s
and
or something?
trained. They're 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
80s, 90s.
I think Mack came around in the 90s, and so Bud Hopkins was an artist in New York. So it's not like he had the bona fides of John Mack. So John Mack is really, you know, in that sense, played a really, really important role in that he was willing to go out and risk his whole career.
Yeah.
After having worked with all these people that said they had these encounters with these beings, you know, and these UFO occupants and so on.
The kind of thing I remember about him, or the sense I got from him when I first read those books, at least the first book of his, because I think he did become more convinced it was literally happening, didn't he? I mean, I think
Bud was more convinced that, but John actually became less convinced that it was literal.
That's interesting.
His last book was, Passport to the Cosmos.
Which I haven't read. No, and I've never read that one. I've read his other book, Abduction, which is...
Abductions was more literal. The first one where he did these case studies of these people and wrote them up in a book. You know, Bud Hopkins was very interested in trying to get physical evidence and proof that this was actually really happening. Like he would study marks on people's bodies and things. And John wasn't really interested in that. He just said it doesn't matter. He saw it as something way more cosmic.
That's what was cool. I remember in either one of his books, or I see him saying it, he was sort of, when he was first approaching it, saying, you know, something's happening here to these people. Is it literally happening? Or is it just some psychic event that's happening? If we could prove it's not literally happening, the psychic event happening is just as interesting and just as strange and just as meaningful to me. Like, that seems just as powerful to me. Like, why would we all be thinking this is happening? If it's not literally happening, what the hell is happening? You know, and he applied that to the abduction thing, but I feel it applies to a lot of this stuff. You know,
I think you're right.
Even the sort of spiritual stuff we were talking about before and all this stuff, you know, even if it's not literally happening, why the fuck do we think it's happening?
Well, it has physical evidence too.
Yeah.
So there's always a crossover in the physical world at some level.
Would you distinguish, like, I thought I had read something you had said, Leslie, about sort of trying to distinguish the abduction literature and accounts from the UFO stuff. And you were sort of, I think you were treating them separately. Am I wrong about that? Do you believe in the abduction scenarios, or are you more skeptical of that?
Yeah, I mean, I the thing about it, for one, is I'm not an expert on it. So it's never really been my focus. I know many of the people who have had experiences. They're totally normal people. So I'm not disbelieving them. I mean, as far as they perceive it, these things happen, and you hear the same stories over and over again from people all over the world. And in the beginning, people were sending in drawings to Bud Hopkins before anyone knew anything about the alien with the big eyes. And it was just chilling. They were sending drawings to him, and they looked the same. So, I mean, there's obviously a reality to it, and I don't know what to make of it. I mean, I'm not saying it's not real. I just don't have strong beliefs one way or the other, but I'm not saying I don't believe it. No, I do believe these experiences happen to people.
Right. But what they are is the question.
What they are is the question. I can't believe they're just psychic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something more that's happening to people. And then when they come back with marks on their body and have medical effects, which happens a lot. You know,
implants
people with
and stuff like that, with weird implants
or just
and things.
Nosebleeds or more serious illnesses. There are some really serious illnesses that have happened to people. from exposure to just phenomena, not necessarily UFOs, but like balls of light and stuff.
Yes. Yeah,
it's like,
there's
what
a
do you
lot
make
of
of that
stuff. Yeah.
There's weird stuff.
Speaking of weird stuff, though, this guy, Dave Grush, I'm not sure how to...
Grush.
Dave Grush.
Yep.
David Grush. He's... I sort of lost the thread a lot of this around when he was starting to sort of blow his whistle and make his revelations about things. He's a former military guy, right? Or
intelligence,
military intelligence.
He did serve in Afghanistan, so yeah.
He claims to have seen actual technology and things like this, right? Is that what he claims?
Or it was reported to him.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was reported to, so he did an investigation when he was part of the UAP task force. For about 3 years, he was there as a representative of both the NRO and the NGA, the National Reconnaissance Office and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He worked for those at very high levels with high clearances, and he was their UAP rep to the task force. And when he was there, he started looking into reports of there being programs that possessed physical objects that had been retrieved that were of non-human origin. He didn't actually see them himself.
Okay.
But he talked to about 40 people. He interviewed them and learned from them about the existence of these programs. And basically, he was given a lot of physical information. He saw photographs. He was given data, locations, all the stuff that is all classified.
Yeah.
So he took that information to the Inspector General and to Congress, and it's all been provided. It's just that the details can't be told to us because they're classified. But he's 100% sure, given the process he went through with these very high-level, respectable people who would not be making up stories, that these, in fact, we do possess these craft, and that he's also concerned about the illegality of it. That's what makes him a whistleblower. By definition, he's reporting on the fact that there should have been oversight for these programs, but they've actually been escaping oversight and operating on black money and hiding in corporations and independent contractors and stuff like that. I got to know Dave, and I was the one that broke that story when it came out in June of last year, along with my colleague Ralph Blumenthal. So, I mean, I have no doubt that what he's saying is true. And the other thing is that I've talked to some of the other people who he interviewed.
That's what I'm interested in. If you actually make contact with the people who made these claims
some of them,
to him.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've also known some of those people for a long time. They're, in former government officials with high clearance.
Are you going to reveal your sources right here on the Chinwag?
I probably can't. It depends which ones we're talking about, but I have to be really careful about that.
No. I don't want anybody to get in trouble. I don't want anybody to get in trouble. You've talked to these people who claim to have firsthand knowledge of this stuff?
Yeah. And some of the ones that David talked to too, were actually part of these programs. They're still involved in the programs, but some of the people that I've spoken to, I mean, I've known for a long time that in fact we have these crashed objects, but this like really, really solidified that for me.
You were aware of the existence of these things because for most people, I think they're going to go like, yeah, but isn't that all Bob Lazar, crazy Area 51 conspiracy talk? And that, but you have known for a while that there are actual objects.
I have, as far as I could tell, given what my sources told me, and these are people I really trust.
Yes.
And none of it had anything to do with Bob Lazar, by the way. That's not even.
I'm just raising him as an example, though. No. I'm raising him as an example of what is not credible about this stuff. And you say to yourself, but isn't this the realm of guys like that? And I
understand the question, but I'm not even saying Bob Lazar is not credible. He could be very, very credible. I just don't really know. And I didn't spend a ton of time on it because I knew that's like I was saying, Stephen, I knew that would never come out clear one way or the other. So I don't know about Bob Lazar, but I do know about the people that I talk to now. And I know about David Grush, and I have complete faith in him. I mean, he has high integrity, and he went and swore under oath to Congress about all of this.
No, I saw him do it. I saw all that, and
I was in that room. I was in the room for that.
Oh, were you?
It was amazing.
So those hearings were amazing, and a lot of people sort of stood up and paid attention. But now, is there a subsequent investigation?
Where does it sit now? And And to what extent does the Pentagon back him up or not? That's been unclear to me, or whether it's just disowned and it's all being, that's not clear to me either.
Yeah, I mean, there is a Pentagon group called the ARROW, the Old Domain Anomalous Resolution Office, the ARROW. That's when you say about the Department of Defense, that's the Department of Defense group. And they've been kind of at loggerheads with the Congress, the members of Congress who want transparency. And a lot of people have not been happy with the ARROW. They sort of see it as sort of a Project Blue Book type thing, where the head of it was not popular. He was not forthcoming. He would make statements that people got angry about. And he was sort of like a guy trying to repress information rather than bring it out. That's how he was interpreted. He's since left, but that group was set up by a congressional mandate. So, they're supposed to be digging into this, provide reports. You have to realize when you have members of Congress advocating for this, it's because they know a lot more than we do.
Wow, that's
they know a lot more than we do. They have been briefed in skiffs, in secure environments with all kinds of information that's classified. Wow. You can only imagine, right? And including the information from Dave Grush, which is classified. In terms of an investigation, you're asking, like, I always wonder, like, what is Congress going to do with this information? Because they have it, And like, I think it's very difficult. It's not like they can just go to a program and say, let me in.
Sure.
These programs are so tightly controlled. And a lot of them are in private industry so there's a whole universe of laws that protect their property.
Oh, I didn't realize
things like
that.
Yeah, they were like
so there's private contractors who are doing this stuff. There's some
they
weird
were like
fucking
subcontracted.
Elon
Musk. Oh boy, I can't even imagine.
Intentionally, they were contracted to hold this stuff.
Oh God,
because it's way more. Oh yeah. It's not like somebody can write a Freedom of Information Act about it or even get access to it. It's not sitting in the CIA or something.
I didn't realize that.
Didn't Dave Grush make a claim that one of these things is sort of bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, and the time anomaly if you step inside of it, apparently, and stuff like that? Was that one of the claims that he made, or am I imagining that?
I know that people have talked about that. I don't remember. Did he? I don't think he said that to Congress, did he?
I don't know, but I don't think he did. But I think that was one of the somewhere I read that was one of the things he was told about. And what's interesting is, like, a number of experiencers have reported that. And there's a physicist named Hal Puthoff. I don't know if you ever heard of Hal Puthoff. No.
He's been able to. Well, he studies general relativity and special relativity, and he's this expert theoretical physicist. And he's written this paper explaining from the perspective of general relativity how that would actually occur.
It could be
something
possible.
Could be small on the outside and huge on the inside. There are explanations for all this stuff if you're looking at some reality that's way in the future, I guess. Some people propose that these might be time travelers.
That's my big thing. I'm always talking about that.
My mind is like,
I'm big on the time travel theory.
Yeah?
That they've
cool.
actually,
I like that too.
Well, I'm big. I like that one. I mean, it's like,
you like the interdimensional.
More and more and more, that makes sense to me that something like that could be happening.
But we're moving away from, like, we were talking about this paradigm, which I was really digging on, which was the Vallee religion.
Getting too crazy for you, Steve?
Like that.
And
now we're into this.
Yeah, right.
Well, now we're more into, like,
Steve?
We need to shut this down. I'm uncomfortable. No, like, you know what I mean? Like, we went from talking sort of almost like there's a reality there, but there's a lot of symbolic overlay to something that sounds much more like there are creatures from another world that are, and we've got their craft. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different kind of paradigm.
It is.
I know that there's no clear, bright line between them, but you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the difficulty of the whole thing. Like, you have these physical craft. They're made by what they call NHI now, which is another term that's actually been in government legislation that actually didn't pass.
What is it?
Non-human intelligence.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So you have these physical craft, but then you have all these other aspects of it that seem to be non-physical, mythological, affects people's consciousness. And then there's these physical craft, and, like, how do you put it all together? That's the puzzle.
It's Fortean, Charles Fort.
It is. And that's what everybody...
Yeah.
And
it's
that's what people
Fortean.
like Jacques Vallee, and a lot of people have sort of come along now with Jacques Vallee, and it's just a constant discussion. I mean, there's no real way to put your finger on it,
Have you dealt with him? Have you met him and interacted with him, Jacques Vallee?
Oh, yeah. He's in my circle of connections. I
thought you were about to say he's in the circle sitting around. Yeah, no, I was like, he's in the seance circle?
I kind of wish he would. Awesome. I wouldn't mind it.
Holy cow.
No.
Well, he must be fascinating.
In my circle, he's brilliant. I mean, he's getting on in years, but he's still going strong.
Are you worried, though, at all, Leslie, about the incredible, just breakneck speed of AI sophistication and in imagery and video? I'm worried that there's no example of UFO footage that will be compelling in the future because everything can be faked so convincingly given these technologies. Like, does that worry you at all?
I mean, I know exactly what you're saying. I think the way to get around that is if something is released directly from the Department of Defense and they say, this is our video, our Navy pilot so-and-so took it on such and such a date, then we know. Okay. But yeah, the ability to have people have to create. So I think that's one reason why there's so much effort to try to get the Department of Defense to release the videos, because we know they have them. 100% certain they have videos way better than the 3 that we put out in the New York Times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's without, and when do we get to see those? They exist.
Why do you think they're hiding them? Why do you think they won't?
Why would they not? Yeah. That's what I can never figure out is exactly what the game they're playing is. Why they don't release another one.
I mean, they've been hiding this thing since the 1940s. Yeah. So it all goes back to the bigger picture and they just automatically classify everything, and they're going to, the least they can release, the better, as far as they're concerned. Plus, they're running around doing the things that Department of Defense officials do. It's like, this is not high on their agenda, right?
Yeah.
But even the Arrow, I mean, people were hoping that the group that was set up, one of the things they might do is work on that. But they're trying to get all the different government agencies to provide all their files and their data to this one centralized location, and just organizing it and taking depositions from people is just so much. And they haven't really been in a position to demand these kinds of declassification, but that's what the Congress people are trying to make happen.
I'm so interested in the fact that all of this is happening and it doesn't seem to be making the impact you would think it would be making on people. That I sit here and go, like, why isn't everybody freaking the fuck out?
Do you think I feel that way every day?
I'm sure you feel that way. I'm sure you feel that way for a lot of reasons. And it's like, I certainly feel that way too. I don't understand why everybody isn't freaking the hell out all the time. I mean, there's basically, it's been tacitly, not even tacitly, it's been openly acknowledged that this is happening.
I know. It's absolutely
and nobody
true.
Seems to care. It's as if somebody just handed forward the formula to go, well, it looks like God might actually exist. And everybody just kind of goes, who cares? It's like, oh, well, whatever. And you're like, really? They just said God exists. I mean, it's like, it's kind of insane to me that it doesn't seem to be making any impact. And what is that, though? Why doesn't it seem to be making the impact? And then I think to myself, is it the way it's being kind of fed to us is making it kind of dull and boring and sort of quotidian or something? I don't understand why it doesn't have the impact.
I relate so much to what you're saying. I mean, I think most people don't, for one, they don't know anything about it. I mean, to us, it's like we live in this reality. To us, it's like part of our daily life. But when you just walk up to the person on the street, most of them don't even know there was a story in 2017 that changed everything about UFOs. They don't know anything. So I think that's a lot of it. And then they're also just busy with their daily lives trying to keep their jobs together and feed their families.
Yes.
And even if they do hear something, they might go, that's kind of interesting, but I got to go to work,
Yeah, that's true. Life,
it's like we have the luxury to be concerned about these things, but a lot of people don't.
Should we bother being concerned about it? I mean, Steve, you were talking about this, but Steve, right? I mean, yes, I agree, and I think Steve does, but it's like, but it raises a question we talk about, Steve.
Yeah, well, sometimes we get this question like, why are you guys going on about Bigfoot or UFOs?
Why are you talking about this stuff?
Yeah, isn't that distracting you from the wars and the climate crisis and I just wonder, what do you say to that kind of a charge too, Leslie? Are you like, well,
why are you bothering talking about this stuff? Yeah.
Because I feel, and this is what I had to deal with when I left regular journalism to do this 100% full time. I think that there's plenty of other people doing all the other issues. For one, I felt that at the time. you know, like I was doing human rights coverage and I was covering wrongful convictions and all the stuff that I really passionately cared about.
You did a book on Burma.
Burma.
Right.
And it was like, I felt like, oh my God, I'm abandoning all my political prisoners in Burma to study UFOs.
Yeah.
Like,
but that's exactly it.
Am I going to explain that to the guy in the jail cell in Burma?
Yeah, Aung San Suu Kyi is like, come on, Leslie, help us out.
I was horrified by it. I was horrified by that. I felt really guilty about it.
Sure.
But I also felt like this is something transcendent. So there was something to me that was transcendent about it.
Yeah.
And I think of course it's important to cover the suffering and the wars and I mean, all those things. I'm devastated by the way the world is right now, but it's not, somebody else can do that just as well as I can.
I see.
But nobody else is going to do this. Yeah. And I guess personally too, it just had so much meaning to me on a personal level. That for me to be able to integrate that with my work was like a dream. I never could ever imagine I would be able to do that.
I feel like if this stuff is potentially real, imagine the possible benefits to humankind. Imagine the possible good things for humankind that could be a result of this. We'd have no idea. You know, so it's like, and it is a little bit like, if we could prove the existence of God, what difference would that actually make?
And that's what the Pentagon's trying to figure out. Is like, how can we make use of that technology, right? And I think I liked it because it points to what is reality. I mean, we don't even understand the nature of the physical world. And it's the same thing with the ectoplasm. It's like the way they described it in the early years was there's some kind of a force at play. There's some kind of force here that we don't understand.
Yeah.
It's like it's a scientific problem, right?
Yes.
And some kind of biologically connected force that's like, and that's the way these scientists would kind of go. And they saw it more as a biological thing than anything else. It was sort of...
That's interesting.
Anyway, so that, you know, and it's like, and same thing with UFOs. They're pointing to another, because they can do things that aren't supposed to be possible. So I like the fact that it's opening up the door to a bigger reality.
Right.
That there's more to reality than we can perceive with our 5 or 6 senses. And so I want to know what that is. I want to know what the nature of our world is. And it's like a doorway into that. It's like a doorway.
Yeah, I like this idea a lot. And I think in philosophy, there are these things that were popular, like at the same time as like the rise of the ectoplasm. There was a huge movement about, are there vitalistic forces inside biological organisms that form them into, and is there panpsychism? And a lot of this stuff got eliminated during like the logical positivists, 1930s, 1940s, but it didn't really get disproven. They just said you can't point to a verification of it.
Right.
So it lost popularity. And it's interesting to see that in philosophy now panpsychism is coming back. Yeah. And maybe vitalism will come back too. Yeah.
That is really interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what really compelled me to take this on. I just feel such a personal drive. And it's like what Paul said, why doesn't everyone feel this way? How can they not?
How
can everybody not like, you know, there's like possible visitors from another, even earlier, possible
people are
aliens.
Dead inside.
Yeah, totally.
Curiosity.
It's like, don't you want to know where they're from and who they are, what they're
like
doing
you
here?
said, though, it's just another sort of strand and just another element in this like just sludge flow of information that people are getting so much information. It's such an overload, but it's just another thing that you just sort of can't, you know, I mean, how can you support all of this information? And then this on top of it, it's just like you can't really take it all in. There's so much coming so fast at everybody that it's like, you know, how the hell can you
and then, you know, they see movies and stuff and it's just sort of considered to be science fiction pretty much. So unless they really know and are paying attention to what's going on, they're not going to think of it any other way. Either a joke or science fiction or whatever. Yeah. So it's sort of understandable, but it's way more out there than it used to be before 2017. I mean, unbelievably.
That's true.
Yeah, it's like it's for me because I was working before and after.
That must feel like a validation for you a little bit.
Oh my God, it's been such incredible because the things I was advocating for in my book in 2010, there were like 4 points that I made in the beginning, and they've all come to pass. But also, it's like for me, there's pre-2017 and post-2017. They're completely different worlds.
Yeah,
completely different. And I think for a lot of the people out there, they're way more aware of this now than they were before. just because our government's engaged with it. So and we've had congressional hearings and legislation and, pilots going on 60 Minutes. I mean, 60 Minutes had never covered this before.
That's amazing.
So, it's just really, really had a lot of attention in the media and in the government, and people are more aware of it. Definitely.
Well, you have opened my eyes on a lot of things today. And you've been very generous with your time.
Yeah, extremely.
It's really fun talking to you guys, and I'd be happy to come talk to you guys more.
Thank you, Leslie.
Ooh. Once again,
that was crazy.
A heavy chat with Leslie Kean. There's no idle chit chat with her, is there?
We compare the Chinwag to like meeting your friend in a bar, but I think my actual barroom conversations, they don't go this deep. So
no,
that's
they
the
really
beauty
don't.
of the Chinwag.
It's amazing stuff. Super amazing. She's kind of perfect Chinwag guest, I think. Yeah, she was amazing.
She really helps put this interesting context on UFOs. Like there's sort of the people who believe it's literally real, and then there's this more symbolic interpretation, and she knows all that stuff. It was fascinating.
Yeah, she got a handle on the whole topic. Amazing. Well, fantastically good times once again, Steve, with you.
Indeed, sir.
And our special guest here, as always. To all of you out there in podcast land, Wagon.
Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films, hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein. Original theme music by Luke Top, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Audio production supervision by Jared Brom and Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Jeff Neal. Animation created by Alex Sokol. Research assistance by Aidan Brooks. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.